Changing the way the president wins the White House. Some Republican state lawmakers pitching a plan to change the rules for how the Electoral College votes in certain blue states are allocated. Now, the potential move is outraging Democrats, including the head of Michigan's Democratic Party, who calls it, quote, election rigging. Let's bring in former Republican Congressman Bob McEwen of Ohio and former Democratic Congressman of Pennsylvania, Joe Sestak. And gentlemen, both of your respective states, blue states, have, Republicans controlling both houses, so they could make the change. And Congressman Sestak, I mean, I looked it up, Article 2, Section 1, it does leave it up to the state legislatures to determine the calculation of their respective electoral votes, so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to respect that the states can do what they decide to do within their own borders. But that said, before they take a step like this, for whatever reason, I think they have to look at the whole of the United States. So, for example, if one or two states does change it, let's say Texas, which has a lot of electoral votes, and now it's going to distribute its votes upon how much each candidate gets. But right next door, but nearby, is California with 12% of the population of America, and they don't change. All of a sudden, Texas's citizens, contrary to the last couple hundred years, has the heft of its vote changed. Second, and what of great concern is if you have a third party. All of a sudden, if all of the states change, you might have maybe 15 rural states where it puts a little bit of money into media, this third party. It isn't expensive. It gets 20% of the votes in those states. That means it might have 6 electoral votes, and if there's a tie overall, it can then bargain like a parliamentary system. The bottom line is, we have bad enough gerrymandering as it is within the states. If we start messing around with the sanctity of the national electoral process to have gerrymandering nationally, we'll have a bigger problem.
Congressman McEwen, what's interesting is I looked at the latest Gallup poll. It came out just a short time ago. A huge majority of Americans want to change the Electoral College system, 63% versus a scant 29% who want to keep it. And what's interesting is more Democrats want to change the Electoral College, get rid of it. Is that because a lot of people feel as though it's outdated, it has outlived its original purpose, and it is at base inherently undemocratic to give the big swing states all this disproportionate influence?
Well, let me say that when the president takes the oath of office tomorrow for the 57th time in our history, making America the continuing record for the longest, oldest government on the planet, I don't think you can overemphasize the significance of that being the Electoral College. When our founders put in that in order to be president, every president has to carry at least half of the country. And that changes everything. They're going to go for the 6th government in the last 15 years on Tuesday in Israel. When there was a special election in California a few years ago, 135 people applied because the parties were not involved in that special election. Under our system, the Electoral College means that whoever takes that oath of office has carried half of the country. And I believe that that is the major ingredient that is what has made our system so successful all of these years. Now, of course, as mentioned, you can change how they're distributed. Nebraska and Maine say according to whatever congressional district you're carrying. But the Electoral College, in my mind, is the single most important part of our national election process.
Congressman Sestak, when you go back and you read the Federalist Papers, the framers talked about their deep concern that there was a disadvantage to the smaller, especially the rural states.
Right.
Because communications back then were so primitive, and transportation was very, very difficult, and they felt as though, wait a minute, the candidates can't get their message out. They can't go to some of these rural areas, and so let's devise this system to make it more equal. Well, that's not the case anymore, is it?
Well, actually, Ronald Reagan spoke very well about this exact point. He said those who want to do away with the electoral system will actually disenfranchise our Midwestern or rural states. And he said that because we are a republic where states' rights and their representation is important. And he didn't want the tyranny of the majority. What he wanted to make sure that those states, that 15 rural ones, could at least get their electoral vote heard because they had, even though they're rural, at least a decent amount of electoral votes. It's very important that we have the minority well represented.
If you just do it on a proportionality like Maine and Nebraska, right?
Yes, but Maine and Nebraska, as you know, only have 2 and 3 congressional districts, and only once has any president not won everything there? When you begin to get into states like Texas or Pennsylvania, then you're beginning as an individual state to gerrymander what the outcome can be. Then, 4 years from now, if Democrats control that legislature, then they change it back to the old way. And soon, you've lost so much trust in politicians already, you lose trust in the sanctity of electoral process. It isn't perfect, but it's better than anything else.
What's wrong with direct popular vote? Al Gore is an advocate of it. Of course, there have been 4 presidents who have been elected who didn't win the popular vote, and George W. Bush beat Al Gore in one of those.
Well, as you know, regardless if you're a popular former president like Teddy Roosevelt or an eccentric multi-billionaire, you cannot become president unless you carry half of the country because of the Electoral College. If you do away with the Electoral College, let any popular or movie star or baseball successful player, if you let all of those people run for president, you would have a presidential ballot that looked like the Manhattan phone book. It's only because of the Electoral College that we have a two-party system, and if we do away with that or amend that, then our country will take a spin that we have never had in our history.
Joe Sestak, Bob McEwen, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Greg. Thanks.
Thank you.